interestingly enough, all of these items on this list, when Berkeley and AT&T were working together earlier, were meant for architectural extinction 5 or 6 years before. And nobody wanted to bother to do the work to actually do that. That's where I think most of the issues really revolved around, in my opinion, for the exciting times that Berkeley, USL, and a couple of little companies had at any given point in time. And really what you get down to here is, where does this boundary end? Maybe that continues to this day. Maybe one can consider that these are Unix inventions. So wouldn't it be funny if it turns out that all people are arguing about are things that are so obsolete as to be almost laughable to a hardened developer who goes, I can do that better. I've got a much better idea on how to manage memory, how to interface to the outside world. Well, this is what drove me when I was looking at this, is focusing on letting Unix and other systems have their own innovations, but then out-innovating them. And one of the things I really admire about certain other groups is the fact that they don't stay stuck in the past. They actually leave in the dust their own creations. They out-develop. They out-think what they are working on at every given point in time. They stretch beyond. And they do it in a very credible and straightforward way. That's one of the best ways of ensuring you have a genuine first-rate system at any given point in time. And that's how you make your own innovations. With 386BSD, after leaving Berkeley, we were faced with a dilemma here. When we were originally with Berkeley, Berkeley was going to release this code in a usable fashion. 3 times they were supposed to release it and didn't. And at the end of Net 2, they did not release a working version to everybody in the articles that we were writing to. We wrote to readers, and we said, you're going to get this, because we were told they were going to get this. So now, here we get this big surprise at the end of this, that they're not going to get this. And we didn't care for that too much, so we completed this and delivered it to the reader. Because then we made good on our promise. Past that, it was whether or not it would live on its own, given that people were going to want to take it someplace. Had no further ambition past that very much. Maybe writing about it because it was a very interesting project. So all we did was set our sights on basic functionalities without new issues. We didn't want to grow the base. Berkeley was going to have to be responsible for what they committed to and what we helped them do. But we did innovate stopgap mechanisms. Those mechanisms were important. That meant that the code got out to people. We didn't use any of the Unixisms that we could correctly identify and could track down as being something that somebody cared about. And we took it further in terms of regulatory issues because we didn't want to have someone see that what we were doing was anything other than going and committing to our promise that we stated originally when we started the work up, that we were going to get Berkeley Unix onto the 386, and it was going to be available to people. We did it. It was very simple. It took a lot of work, and we kept the regulatory issues involving issues of export controls out of it entirely. And that was our way in going through this, of making sure that the reader, the user, had a chance to execute this code. Now, it may be that it wasn't usable to them, or they would take it farther or not take it farther. That's irrelevant. They got a chance to try it. And I know there's a lot of people who sent me an email going, I had to try a single floppy UNIX system, just at least the once, to see that you could actually bring off such a thing. And that was kind of a fun thing. There was 250,000 downloads. I think it was the first week. And that was pretty impressive. It tended to melt down routers at the time.
There were mirror sites. They had to set up major mirror sites all over the place.
That was the beginning of the mirror site.
Yes.
With release 1.0, we went and we took it further by implementing Berkeley's architectural review suggestions. And that actually allowed us to implement what was called an active kernel object model. What that meant was that it was possible to move away from static configuration issues that were in Unix early on in all Unix-like systems, because they relied on a very simplified view of the universe that could fit into a PDP-11-sized computer. And now that we're able to use a larger scale architecture, it seemed a sensible thing to do. And we aimed it towards still further innovation, the dynamic kernel, which I'll get into. This is what happened. This is largely, it has continued on after losing the track of history. There are other people, other operating systems that are far more interesting in terms of their development model. But it's still running today. This is as of June 10th on this GIF here. But it's in active use as a project to be able to demonstrate this state-of-the-art functionality, which is what we were aiming to do. We think that this constitutes a unique intellectual property in and of itself right here, and that no operating system has yet gone quite into these directions. The closest we know of anyone working in these directions is that Microsoft's research projects are aimed vaguely in this area, at least the last time I talked to Rick Rashid a few months back. And my concern at the time was, why isn't open source constantly innovating as faster than closed source? It's got all of the capabilities, it's got wonderful developers, rich intellect, and the mission to do so. That's how it stays away from situations that can bedevil it at times. You have to have a future that is enough separated from the past so that people don't get focused on the past, on the present. A good lawyer stays focused on the present and doesn't think about the future quite so much. And they try to see where the past and the present fit together. And that's where their mindset is. That's how they can deliver good work product in their profession. But a good developer and an excellent designer, they have to always be focused a little farther down the stream. Now, in closing, what's not important? These are non-issues. Licensing, I don't think, is as important an issue. You may like one, you may like others. I think they're great for their respective uses. I think they do a wonderful job. And I think it doesn't really make as much difference to the supportability of open development, or in Richard's terms, free software products. Rights enforcement, that's the rights holder. That's not the issue for the developer. What it is you don't want to be in the rights holder's trajectory at any given point in time. That's how you stay out of that particular argument. But you have to respect the rights holder is going to be awfully concerned about their rights at times. Maybe rightly, maybe wrongly. It doesn't matter which, but that's not the issue to be discussed here. That's their issue. you will find that there is litigation galore for lots of specious reasons. And that's also a non-issue, because that happens irrespective of good process, bad process. All it is bad litigation can go a lot farther when you don't have a disciplined way of reacting to it. The open source business model is also not important in this consideration. It's very important if you're trying to please, say, a venture capitalist who sees something at the end of a rainbow here and has to see that. But that's not the issue for a sustainable open source model. You don't have to have obvious money involved in this. There will always be money involved with everything you do with software because it is an intellectual property. It will always be an intellectual property. We have to recognize that. But these aren't important. Here's what's important. Leadership. When you have a leader in a community, must realize that leader is not a punching bag for ideas. A leader is somebody who can explain to you why you go in a particular direction. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is whoever you decide is the leader of these things is to support their efforts to be able to maintain a competent leadership. Because they don't need dissension of ideas and random thought. What they need is they need a courageous group of people who think clearly about why it is that they're involved in staying in the mission that I talked about earlier. Okay? You guys decide who the leaders are going to be. That's one of the wonderful things about open source. But once you commit, you stay committed, I think, to leadership. And realize that that doesn't mean second guessing, that means there is something about why that leader is there in the first place. But you also have to expect something in return. That's accountability. We're all going to have to be accountable. We're all going to make mistakes. I've made my fair share of it. And we're also going to have to plan a graceful recovery. Because if we don't, we're just going to complicate matters later on. And the best way of doing it is having a good process, and I'll get to that in a moment. And so when you get down here, if you have an obvious intent as to what you're doing here, it's pretty clear. You can either pay attorneys or you can pay developers. I'd rather pay developers. I love attorneys in their own special way. But I know that developers will make a product and make a good one. And those are the guys who I've been fighting for all of my life. How do we get into the current situation you see in your newspaper? This is my opinion. Not everybody shares this. But having been the version, let's say, and watched it from the sidelines, this is what I think was the issues. You really have to take, even if you're not doing a business, you're still doing a business. You have to be serious about the IPR issues. It's not going to go away. Believing that because something is considered free software and it's not going to be a target because nobody's putting any obvious money in it or getting a paycheck from it is a little naive. Just let me flat out say that. It's still intellectual property. There's still money flowing through the system over it. So you always have